earlier age, solitude was an inescapable part of life. When night fell and the hearth dimmed, one might sit alone with only their thoughts or a candle and book for company. Communication was slow, communities were small, and privacy was often physical. The closing of a door, the walk alone through woods or fields. Fast forward to today's digital age, and solitude has become something we must actively seek out. We are never truly alone. Smartphones link us to others every waking moment, and even in physical isolation, we carry the crowd in our pockets. This script explores how our conception of privacy and solitude has transformed from historical rhythms of life and cherished solitary pursuits to the always connected present, and why reclaiming solitude matters more than ever. You're on IK Watch Education, a place for stories about culture, history, literature, technology, art, and music. Each video is different, but always made with heart. Make yourself comfortable. Enjoy the listen. In centuries past, most people lived in close quarters and communal settings. Privacy, as we think of it today, was scarce. Throughout the Middle Ages, families often shared one-room dwellings and spent their days in the constant presence of others. Most people in the Middle Ages shared communal living space and lived most of their lives publicly in the midst of other people. Historian Diana Webb notes, solitude was largely limited to one's thoughts during daily chores or the rare moments of being truly alone. Only gradually did the concept of personal privacy space emerge by the late medieval period. Wealthier households began constructing private chambers or studies' quiet rooms where one could read or reflect in peace. This was a novel development, distinct from the extreme solitude of hermits or monks. For the ordinary person, however, solitude was often a luxury or a curiosity. Despite the prevalence of communal life, many voices in Western thought extolled the value of solitude. Philosophers, writers, and religious figures historically saw solitude as a path to insight or spiritual growth. The Stoic Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius famously wrote, "For nowhere, either with more quiet or more freedom from trouble, does a man retire than into his own soul." To Aurelius, even surrounded by an empire, the deepest tranquility was found within, in moments of solitary reflection. During the Renaissance, Michel de Montaigne likewise argued for withdrawing from the fray of society. The wise person will flee the crowd, endure it if necessary, but given the choice, choose solitude. Montaigne advised in the 16th century. In his Essay of Solitude, Montaigne suggested that seclusion, whether in a country house or simply in the midst of cities, allows one to live at one's ease, free from the vices and pressures of the crowd. In the 19th century, the American thinker Henry David Thoreau became an icon of deliberate solitude. Thoreau withdrew to a small cabin by Walden Pond to live simply and wrote of the joys of living with only himself for company. "I never found the companion that was so companionable as solitude," he mused in Walden. Thoreau observed that one can feel more lonely in a crowd than when truly alone. "We are for the most part more lonely when we go abroad among men than when we stay in our chambers," he wrote, insisting that a person deep in thought is always alone. Let him be where he will. Such reflections show that throughout Western history, solitude was often seen as beneficial, a source of rest, creativity, or spiritual renewal, even if daily life allowed far fewer opportunities for it than today. It's worth noting that historically, complete solitude was sometimes sought in extreme forms. Religious hermits and monks in the Christian tradition and in other faiths took vows of silence or lived in isolated cells to pursue higher contemplation. In medieval Europe, for example, an anchoress might be literally walled into a small cell attached to a church. Living out her days in prayerful solitude, these were respected paths of devotion, though far from the experience of the average person. For most people of the past, solitude was intermittent and often tinged with practical purpose, the shepherd alone with his flock, the scholar alone at her desk. Still, they understood, perhaps better than we do now, the value of being alone. The prevalence of diaries, meditative poetry, and letters from earlier centuries shows how people treasured their inner life and private thoughts. Solitude was both a physical state and a mental one, the opportunity to commune with oneself or with the divine without distraction. In summary, before the digital era, human solitude was constrained by social structures like tight-knit villages, large families, and daylight hours, yet it was also celebrated in literature and philosophy. Privacy was primarily a physical condition, finding a place away from others, and those moments were often seen as restorative. As we shall see, the arrival of modern technology would dramatically alter this balance, expanding personal, physical space, while paradoxically shrinking the mental space available for solitude. The advent of digital technology, from ubiquitous smartphones to social media networks, has profoundly altered the meaning of privacy and the experience of solitude. Today, it is possible to be physically alone, yet never experience true solitude, thanks to the constant virtual connection we carry with us. A few statistics paint the picture of this technological saturation. Globally, people now spend an average of about 4.5 hours per day on their phones, checking them around 58 times a day. In the United States, smartphone users in 2023 were online on their phones roughly 4.4 hours daily, and among younger generations, the totals are even higher. Social media has further filled our quiet moments. The average person spends about 2.5 hours per day on social platforms, scrolling and updating an endless feed of other people's lives. In short, any lull in our day, like waiting in line, sitting on the train, a quiet evening at home, is likely to be instantly filled by reaching for a device. The result is that the mental space once reserved for daydreaming or introspection is now crowded with digital input. Perhaps most emblematic of the privacy shift is how willingly we share our once private moments on the internet. According to a recent UK-US survey, 84% of people post personal information on social media at least weekly, and 42% do so every day. Details that previous generations might have kept to a diary or shared only with close friends, family photos, what they ate for dinner, their feelings about work, are now broadcast to hundreds or thousands of online contacts. Over half of social media users have public profiles. For example, 55% of Facebook users leave their profiles open to anyone, effectively erasing the traditional boundary between one's private life and the public square. In the digital age, privacy is not the default. We must actively choose to withhold personal data if we want to be private rather than the other way around. It's common to feel that if an experience isn't documented online, it didn't really happen. A far cry from earlier eras when large portions of life went unrecorded and known only to oneself and one's immediate circle. The psychological effect of this hyperconnectivity is that being alone no longer feels like solitude. The mind is perpetually tethered to the hive of online content and communication. Instead of sitting with our own thoughts in idle moments, we reflexively reach for a device to provide stimulation or social input. Studies have found that many smartphone users check their device within minutes of a previous check. One analysis showed half of all phone use sessions begin within just 3 minutes of the prior one, a cycle of near-continuous partial attention. We have, in a sense, lost the habit of solitude. Boredom, which can be the front door to creative thought or self-reflection, is now quickly extinguished by a quick scroll through refreshing content. Moreover, the digital age has transformed privacy, not only in the social sense, but also in terms of personal data. Every click, search, or GPS location ping leaves a trace. Tech companies collect vast amounts of information on our habits and preferences. Thus, even when we think we are alone, we often have unseen audiences, algorithms watching, advertisers listening. The disappearance of solitude is intertwined with the disappearance of privacy as control over one's own information. In earlier eras, Your thoughts and daily activities were mostly your own. Now, much of our lives is mediated by technology that logs and exploits our personal details. While this aspect is a broad societal issue, it contributes to a feeling that there is no off switch. We are not only socially connected at all times, but also plugged into an informational grid that never sleeps. To illustrate how deeply technology has permeated our sense of self, a 2023 survey reported that the average American checks their mobile device 159 times a day, roughly every 9 minutes, and 70% of people said they would feel depressed, panicked, or helpless if their phone were lost or taken. Our devices have become like an extra limb or a second brain. The thought of losing that connection induces real anxiety. The French philosopher Blaise Pascal once observed that much of humankind's troubles come from not being able to be comfortably alone. A quote we will revisit: "In the digital age, we see a new twist on this idea. We are so unaccustomed to being alone that the mere possibility of disconnection triggers panic." Thus, the disappearance of solitude is both external due to constant communication and internal. We have developed a dependence on constant stimuli. In sum, technology has delivered incredible benefits: global connectivity, information at our fingertips, but at the cost of what once was everyday solitude. Privacy is now something we negotiate actively. Privacy settings, choosing what not to share, rather than something inherent in daily life. Solitude has become an experience one must intentionally create, or a problem one must solve. I can't focus because my phone keeps buzzing. The next section will explore how this loss of solitude and privacy is affecting us psychologically, often in ways we are only beginning to understand. Being constantly connected comes with a price. As humans, our brains and bodies evolved to have periods of stimulation and periods of quiet rest. The digital environment, however, bombards us with continuous social input, notifications, and information overload. Psychologists and researchers across North America and Europe are finding that the erosion of solitude correlates with rising levels of anxiety, stress, and mental exhaustion. Simply put, never being alone or never feeling allowed to be alone is overstimulating our minds and fraying our nerves. Multiple studies have now linked heavy digital engagement, especially social media use, with increased risks of mental health issues. A systematic review of research published in recent years found a strong association between excessive social networking and higher rates of depression and anxiety. In the US, the Surgeon General in 2023 issued an advisory about youth mental health, warning that social media can fuel loneliness and depression in teenagers. Likewise, a Canadian Journal of Psychiatry study reported correlations between time spent on devices and feelings of psychological distress among adolescents. While correlation is not causation, the consistent pattern is troubling. The more we fill our days with digital interactions, the more prone we seem to become to negative moods. One reason is the phenomenon often referred to as FOMO, the fear of missing out. When connected to a network of hundreds of friends or influencers sharing highlights of their lives, it's easy to feel anxiety or inadequacy about one's own life. The mind, constantly comparing and seeking updates, never fully relaxes. This contributes to a baseline of unease. A survey of professionals found that constant alerts amplify FOMO and stress. Nearly half of employees, 47%, said they feel overwhelmed by the number of notifications they receive in a day. Each buzz or banner demanding attention creates a small jolt of stress, a sense of something needs tending. Over time, this can accumulate into chronic anxiety. Cognitively, the lack of solitude wreaks havoc on our attention and focus. We are interrupted by pings and multitasking between apps so frequently that our ability to concentrate is undermined. Research from the University of California, Irvine famously showed that when a person is interrupted, say by an email or message, It takes, on average, 23 minutes to fully regain focus on the original task. In a world of constant connectivity, those interruptions happen far more often than every 23 minutes, meaning many of us never reach a state of deep focus at all during our day. The result is mental fatigue. Our brains become like overloaded circuit boards, always switching tasks, never powering down. This state of continuous partial attention can lead to feelings of burnout. In fact, some psychologists talk about digital burnout, exhaustion, not just from work, but from the relentless inflow of digital interactions and information. Another impact of losing solitude is on self-awareness and emotional health. When we have no time alone, we have fewer opportunities to process our feelings or reflect on our experiences. Some mental health experts suggest that the rise in anxiety disorders is partly related to this constant outward focus. We become strangers to our own inner life, which ironically can make the prospect of solitude even more uncomfortable. It's a vicious cycle. We avoid being alone with our thoughts by turning to our devices, which in turn keeps us anxious and stimulated, making it harder to ever be alone with ourselves calmly. As one commentator put it, we are distracting ourselves into anxiety. There is also the concept of nomophobia, short for no mobile phone phobia, the fear or discomfort of being without one's smartphone. Surveys indicate this is widespread. In one US poll, about 3 in 4 people admitted to feeling panicked if they thought they lost their phone. This level of dependency on connectivity was virtually unknown 20 years ago. The anxiety of being unplugged even briefly suggests that many of us have developed a baseline stress that only constant connectivity can appease, a hallmark of addiction-like behavior. Indeed, some brain studies have shown that the dopamine feedback loops of social media likes, notifications can condition our brains, much like gambling or other addictions, leading to compulsive use that feels beyond our control. On the flip side, compelling evidence shows that restoring some solitude and screen-free time can quickly improve mental well-being. In a controlled experiment at an American university, researchers asked young adults to limit social media use to just 30 minutes a day total for 2 weeks. The results were dramatic. Those who cut back reported significantly lower levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, and FOMO compared to a control group that continued their usual usage. Even their overall outlook on life brightened with more positive emotions. Another randomized trial in Europe found that a simple 3-week reduction in smartphone screen time led to measurable improvements in stress, sleep quality, and overall well-being, suggesting a causal link between excessive screen time and mental health challenges. These studies from credible institutions, Iowa State University, University of Konstanz in Germany, among others, underscore a hopeful point. The negative psychological effects of overconnection can be reversed when we reintroduce a bit of disconnection and solitude into our lives. One can also look at the extreme case of burnout, often discussed in the context of work, but increasingly tied to the always-on culture. Burnout is characterized by chronic stress, exhaustion, and a sense of overwhelm. While job pressures contribute, the inability to ever truly clock out plays a role. People bring work home on their devices, answer emails at midnight, or feel the need to constantly check in. European researchers have pointed out that clear boundaries, like not checking work messages off hours, are crucial to preventing burnout. Some countries have even legislated this. In France, a right to disconnect law was passed in 2017, which obligates employers to refrain from encroaching on employees' off-duty time with calls or emails. Employees do not have to answer work communications during their personal time. This policy implicitly recognizes that private, disconnected time is essential for mental health. The fact that laws are needed to protect solitude from work speaks volumes about how invasive connectivity has become. Finally, consider the effect on creativity and deep thought. Many great ideas in science, art, and literature have been born in moments of solitude, long walks, quiet Sunday afternoons, time spent reading or gazing at the stars, constant connectivity steals those moments of fertile boredom. There is a growing concern among educators and psychologists that younger generations, glued to screens, have fewer chances to let their minds wander, and daydreaming is important for creativity and problem solving. In a very real sense, the disappearance of solitude might mean the diminishing of our creative and reflective capacities. We risk becoming reactive beings, always responding to inputs, rather than proactive thinkers charting our own path. In summary, the psychological toll of never unplugging is becoming clear. Higher anxiety and stress, shortened attention spans, fragmented thinking, and a loss of inner richness. However, awareness of these issues is also rising, which brings us to a counter-movement emerging in response, a push to reclaim solitude and balance in the digital age. Faced with the overload of the always connected lifestyle, more and more people in Western societies are seeking ways to disconnect and regain control of their time and attention. Over the past decade, terms like digital detox, mindfulness, and digital minimalism have entered the mainstream vocabulary. A cultural shift is underway. We are beginning to recognize that constant engagement with devices is unhealthy, and solitude, once taken for granted, must now be actively cultivated for the sake of our well-being. One manifestation of this shift is the growing popularity of digital detox events and movements. For instance, in 2024, an initiative called the Offline Club organized a global 24-hour digital detox day. Over 1,000 people pledged to go 24 hours without the internet or smartphones to swap screen time for real time. Participants, prepared by sharing tips on how to cope without devices, essentially relearning how to spend a day unplugged. This idea of a device-free day would have seemed unnecessary a generation ago, but today it's an empowering experience for those who try it. Many participants report feeling surprisingly refreshed and more connected with the world around them after such detox days. They rediscover the pleasure of reading a book uninterrupted, taking a long walk, or having an unhurried face-to-face conversation, activities that bring a sense of calm and fulfillment that scrolling social media seldom does. Employers and governments are also acknowledging the need for disconnection for mental health. We mentioned France's right to disconnect law. Similarly, companies in North America have started encouraging employees to avoid after-hours emails or instituting meeting-free focus days with messaging turned off to allow deep work. Some forward-thinking businesses even host digital detox retreats for their teams' off-site days with no screens, aiming to spark creativity and team bonding in person. All these are attempts to rebalance the role of technology in our lives, to grant people permission to be unreachable at least some of the time. Crucially, the rediscovery of solitude is not just about turning off devices. It's about re-engaging with activities that humans have long found nourishing. Mindfulness and meditation have seen a boom in the West, with secular apps and classes making meditation accessible to millions. These practices train the mind to rest in the present moment, essentially teaching the art of being alone with one's thoughts without panic or distraction. Medical research from institutions like Harvard and NIH has validated meditation's benefits for reducing anxiety and improving concentration. In a world of incessant stimulation, the act of sitting quietly and observing one's breath is revolutionary. It's a direct antidote to FOMO and scattered attention. Many people report that a daily 10-minute meditation feels like an oasis of solitude that recharges them to face the day's busyness more calmly. Spending time in nature is another science-backed way to restore a sense of peace and privacy. Psychologists talk about attention restoration theory, which posits that natural environments replenish our mental energy in a way urban or digital environments can't. Just 10 minutes in a natural setting can significantly lower stress and improve mood, as a Cornell University study showed with college students who felt happier and less stressed after even short outdoor breaks. Doctors in some places have begun prescribing nature time to patients dealing with anxiety or burnout, whether it's a hike in the woods or simply sitting under a tree in a park. Nature provides a solitude companion that calms the nervous system. It's telling that one common piece of advice for those overwhelmed by social media is to go for a walk outside, essentially recreating the solitary walks that writers like Thoreau or Wordsworth took routinely, now as therapy. Beyond nature and mindfulness, there's a return to simple, screen-free pleasures that previous generations enjoyed. Sales of physical books have remained robust, even among young people, as many crave the focused, private experience of reading in silence distinct from multitasking on screens. Vinyl records and turntables have made a comeback, perhaps because listening to a vinyl record is a more intentional, absorbed experience than streaming an infinite playlist. People are picking up hobbies like journaling, painting, gardening, or woodworking, all of which inherently involve solitary focus and can be deeply meditative. Even the resurgence of interest in baking bread or doing puzzles during recent pandemic lockdowns can be seen as a reconnection with slower, solitary pastimes that ground us. To support mental well-being in this always-on era, experts recommend a variety of practices to reclaim solitude and quiet the digital noise. Some of these strategies include very practical adjustments to daily life, while others cultivate a more solitary mindset. Here are a few science-backed approaches one can take. Turn off non-essential notifications. Constant pings create a sense of urgency and anxiety. Silencing unnecessary app notifications reduces that pressure and allows you longer stretches of uninterrupted time. After all, you won't worry about what you don't know is there. Set no-phone zones or times. Establish boundaries, such as no phone use during meals, family time, or the last hour of the day. Treat these as sacred times for real-life connection or reflection. Many have found that banning phones from the bedroom vastly improves sleep and intimacy. Use technology to monitor technology. It sounds ironic, but apps that track your screen time or lock you out after a limit can be very effective. If you notice you spend 3 hours a day on a certain app, you can set a daily limit of, say, 1 hour. Making digital use visible in this way brings mindful awareness to what was previously habitual. Prioritize in-person and offline activities. Schedule meets with friends, join a club, or engage in a hobby that forces you to put the phone aside, whether it's joining a weekly sports group or taking a cooking class. These real-world interactions and skills restore a sense of human connection that no amount of social media likes can match. Maintain a healthy lifestyle. Good diet, exercise, and sleep might seem unrelated to privacy, but they dramatically improve resilience to stress. Regular exercise, for example, can reduce the urge to seek digital stimulation by regulating mood naturally. And getting enough sleep, which means putting the phone away at night, is vital. Poor sleep makes us more prone to anxiety and the quick dopamine fixes of digital media. Practice self-care through solitude. Build small rituals of solitude into your routine. This could mean having your morning coffee on the porch in silence, or taking 15 minutes to journal in the evening. Use this time to check in with yourself. How was my day? What am I grateful for? Such solitary self-reflection used to be common. Think of letter writing or prayer time, and it's essentially a workout for the soul. Connect with nature regularly. As mentioned, nature is a powerful healer of overloaded minds. A weekend hike, some gardening, or simply a walk around the block to notice birds and trees can lower cortisol, the stress hormone, and give you perspective. In nature, we often find it easier to be present and let go of the digital chatter. Embrace JOMO, the joy of missing out. This is more of a mindset shift. Remind yourself that it's okay not to be tuned into everything, everywhere, all the time. Missing some news or not replying to messages instantly is not the end of the world. On the contrary, choosing not to partake in the digital frenzy can bring relief. As an example, many people now intentionally take social media sabbaticals, deleting or pausing their accounts for a while, and often report feeling liberated and more engaged with their real lives. All these measures aim at one thing: reclaiming ownership of our attention and time, and carving out spaces where our mind can be quiet and alone. This rediscovery of solitude is not about rejecting technology entirely or living as a hermit. It's about balance and intentional living. It's recognizing that solitude is a human need, like water or sleep, and making sure we get enough of it. Signs of this rediscovery are visible in small cultural trends. The idea of slow living has gained traction. The concept of slowing down to savor life, whether through slow cooking, slow travel, or simply resisting the urge to multitask. Likewise, terms like hygge, a Scandinavian term for a cozy, contented moment, often enjoyed alone or in calm simplicity, have become popular, emphasizing the pleasure found in simple, quiet moments. These trends, albeit sometimes commercialized, point to a yearning in society, a yearning for presence and peace which excessive connectivity has disturbed. As we embrace these changes, early evidence and experiences show improved mental clarity, better relationships because when we are with others, we're more present, and greater creativity. Many who have cut back on their digital life say they feel like they've gotten time back, hours that can be used for meaningful activities or genuine rest. In essence, they have reclaimed solitude, not as loneliness, but as luxurious time to recharge and get to know themselves again. In the end, the story of privacy and solitude in the digital age is a cautionary tale with a hopeful twist. We've seen how rapidly technology changed the landscape of our daily lives, erasing the natural pauses and private corners that humans used to occupy. Solitude, once an unremarkable fact of life, and even at times a cherished state, became something rare and disappearing in the constant glare of connectivity. The disappearance of solitude is not just a social or psychological curiosity. It touches the core of what it means to be human. Without moments of solitude, we lose an essential context in which to understand ourselves and our experiences. We risk living superficially, constantly externalized, reacting to the latest input with no time to integrate or reflect. Yet, as we've explored, there is a growing recognition of this loss, and with recognition comes action. The movements towards digital balance, the emphasis on mental health, and the revival of solitary pleasures all signal that people are not willing to surrender their inner lives. We are, collectively, remembering that being alone is not being lonely, it is being alive to oneself. Solitude is where ideas are born, where we process grief and joy, where we become comfortable in our own skin. It is in solitude that a person can fully become an individual, apart from the roles and expectations thrust on them by society. In a very real sense, solitude is freedom. The great thinkers and artists of the past knew this, and perhaps the pendulum of history is swinging back to remind us of it again. For anyone feeling the strain of never having a moment to themselves, the path forward doesn't require abandoning modern life or shunning technology. It can start with small steps. Maybe tonight, leave the phone in another room for a while and listen to the quiet. Maybe this weekend, take a walk alone and notice how it feels to move at your own pace with your own thoughts. These simple acts are revolutionary in context. They are statements that your mind is your own, that you deserve peace without needing to perform or consume anything. As we conclude, consider this powerful insight from the 17th century philosopher Blaise Pascal, who saw the trouble coming long before the first smartphone ever beeped. Pascal wrote, "All men's miseries derive from not being able to sit quiet in a room alone." 400 years later, his words ring truer than ever. Solitude isn't a luxury indulgence. It is a basic human necessity, as vital for our psyche as food and air are for our bodies. In reclaiming solitude, we reclaim our humanity. We allow ourselves to disconnect in order to reconnect with our own minds, with the natural world, and ultimately with each other in more authentic ways. So let's each grant ourselves permission to step away from the noise now and then. Sit quietly, let your mind wander, embrace the gentle sanctuary of solitude. In doing so, we may find that privacy and peace of mind were not lost after all. They were only waiting for us to remember their value and invite them back into our lives. Thank you for watching. The IK Watch education team is truly grateful. We're already working on new stories to inspire, surprise, and delight you again. If you enjoy what we do, consider subscribing to the channel. You are our greatest motivation to keep going.